Oh my gosh. Welcome everyone to Diversity in Video Game Music. Hello everybody. Wow, it is late. And
You can
I'm
say
excited to be
that.
able to talk a little bit earlier too. For everyone wondering if I'm looking weird with my headphone off here, it's because there's a little delay. But welcome to our panel. Very excited to talk with you about diversity in video game music, cultural influences, especially ones that don't get represented as often, and navigating the tricky but extremely important way about composing and arranging, as well as covering music with respect to all these different backgrounds. I'll let everyone else introduce themselves. Jade, would you like to go first?
Hello. Apologies. It is nearly 4 a.m. So I've pre-written a self-script for me. So if I'm looking down, that's because I'm looking at my secondary screen here. So just FYI for that. So yes, hello. I am Jade, she, her. I'm currently the audio producer at Silver Rain Games, and before that, I've been a freelance game music composer for roughly 10 odd years. So I guess my background is that I'm Thai, Malaysian, Chinese, born and raised in London, UK. I grew up in a typical Asian household where I was encouraged to experience everything. So swimming, ballet, piano, violin lessons. How I got into video game music, my dad bought me a PlayStation 1 after passing my grade 3 piano exam.
Aww.
And yeah, so like through that, my dad just like bought me Final Fantasy 7, just go, here, I heard it's good. And then and then like since then, that is like pretty much solidified my trajectory since then. So yep, Final Fantasy 9 was the game that made me definitely want to write music for video games. You're Not Alone was like the moment where I was just like, like emotional tears as a young kid and just like, wow, no, this, I had to restart the game and replay it and just to hear the soundtrack again. And then I guess, yeah, through that, I attended all the music clubs in schools. In university, I studied music tech. And so my background instrument-wise is classical piano, but then I've moved on to Javanese gamelan and Japanese taiko drumming. Ooh. So that's my background.
That's awesome. Welcome to the stream, and welcome to VGM Together, of course.
Yes, thank you.
Thanks for joining Hassan.
Yeah, that was an extremely well put together intro. Mine will be much less put together. My name is Hassan Durant. I am a composer and narrative designer based in North Carolina. Let's see, pronouns are he, him. How did I get started with video game music? I guess that would be Golden Sun when I was probably around 8 or 9. I forget the name of the track because I'm on the spot now, but there's just this one track near the beginning when you go into Sol Sanctum, and it was just like the most beautiful thing I'd ever heard at the time. I had to put the Game Boy down to just keep listening to it. Really great. I did not actually think that I would do music at that point, though. That came a lot later, long story. Let's see, I've been a composer for games probably for like 4 or 5 years now. But like the path that I basically have been doing forever has been the writing path. So that's been like a huge part of my background. Yeah, what else? Bro, introduce yourself.
Sure. Well, thank you for that. I appreciate everyone introducing themselves in the kind of window that they'd like. For those who don't know me, of course, my name is PANUGANTI. Ro is short for Rohit. I'm only mentioning that because it feels on theme with the panel, of course. I was born in America, but my parents moved from India to the United States in 1987. I used to go by an online persona called Swiggles before I thought I could be doing music in any sort of like serious public way. I started on piano like many people. I grew up in that sort of second generation household. So I took piano lessons, school. I'm an IT analyst of sorts, but by night I am Batman. I play guitar. I do a lot of YouTube metal and rock remixes of video game covers as well as original writings. I haven't done any official composing, but I adore video game music. And for my like inspirational first video games, I think it's fair to say the Super Nintendo with Donkey Kong Country was probably my first game, and my realization games were maybe Legend of Zelda, Ocarina of Time. There was a few specific tracks that I'll get to talk to later, as well as the Banjo-Kazooie series, and ultimately, discovering by accident that there's a cover community that just exploded my love of VGM. And with that basically takes all three of us to why we're here today to talk about diversity. And I see a lot of awesome people in the chat. I hope you're ready to kind of engage and prep some questions, share some experiences, because this is a panel I could only dream of doing. And also, I'm so lucky to have the co-panelists I do, because both of you have participated in cool talks or have set up panels discussing the either importance of diversity either in its current state, the issues, and the ways of navigating to make this thing that we love feel more us and inclusive, and just ultimately I think better. So we're just gonna go through a little bit of mediating. So I'm gonna pose some questions to my co-panelists, but I'm also posing these questions to you all in chat. So I'd love to hear everyone's takes and listen to everyone's. So my first easiest one is, what has been your experience with video game music regarding different styles and cultural influences? And by that, I mean, what have you heard? What do you see? What don't you see? Either of you want to start?
Yeah, I guess there are a lot of ways that I could approach this. I guess the first one is like my personal.
Oh, we got a little bit of glitch there.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I think you're coming back.
Yeah, you're frozen on my screen.
That's a long.
We're all in suspense. Don't worry. Okay.
Can you all hear me now?
Almost.
No?
I think it's just an internet spike
Hello?
there.
Testing.
Oh, yeah. You're still frozen for me, unfortunately.
Here, I'm going to post it into the chat itself. So everyone in chat, just in case you didn't hear, while we wait just there.
Which chat is this, by the way? Sorry, I have Discord open and just
this
like
is, VGM Together 2.
VGM Together 2.
I can share in our Discord chat there.
Oh, yes, thank you.
Popped out.
Ah, okay, all right, it's in Twitch, got it. just
in case we lose Hassan for a little bit.
Yeah.
Dave, would you like to answer the question briefly?
Yeah, sure. Let me find my notes again. So yeah, experiences with VGM. Oh no, Hassan.
I think he's coming back. Oh,
okay, cool. Oh, nice. I'll just continue talking in that case. So yeah, the question was, what has your experience been with VGM with regards to the styles and cultures represented? Has there been any patterns, commonalities, or absences that you notice? Well, first of all, so many absences, at least at least for me. Yeah. And then my second point that I wanted to bring up is that I think us in this panel session, us collectively, we have a Western lens of gaming experience. So it's only like 2 years ago where I went back to Malaysia for Level Up KL, and then through that, I met like more of the local devs in the Southeast Asia area. So that's where I kind of like learned a little bit more about the what is the game scenes in Indonesia and Singapore and that area. And I'm like, oh yeah, of course, yeah, there are other global game dev communities out there. And like when I went to the convention, it was like so cool because it's also refreshing to see the games being made in that community, and it's just like, wow, I wonder which titles will actually make it like to
Mhm.
be a US release or a UK release or a European release. So that was really, really interesting. So loads and loads of disclaimers there. So I guess my experience with VGM is
We
more
got it
like,
back?
yeah, from my experience with
Yes.
like it's mostly through like, oh, pop, like I guess English Americanized pop culture and
Mhm.
and whatever it is through that. Yeah, sorry, I don't know if that was the direction you wanted
That is,
me to
yes.
go. So it's just like yeah, it's there. I don't really have a comment.
Mhm.
I guess.
Sure. I think Hassan's still having connection issues,
Oh,
so I'm
okay.
gonna try to briefly.
Oh, am I still?
Oh, we can hear you.
You can't.
It's cutting in and out just a little bit,
Hello.
almost.
Oh no.
I see someone in the chat has
What
actually chimed in.
suddenly
Authentic
happened?
Mark
It's
Moon
working
music.
so well. Should I?
Oh yeah, no. Oh, Hassan,
Oh,
are you back?
you look smooth.
What?
You
Maybe I
look
look smooth again.
That?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
All right.
Cool. Hopefully that lasts a while.
Oh, it's cutting in a little bit, but
No.
yes.
Okay.
Oh no, you're frozen again.
Yes. Okay, I've given Hassan a little bit of a troubleshooting help. Hopefully, I'm going to see if he can leave and rejoin. Just to share kind of where I was going with this question, quick, in case he can chime back in.
Yes.
Essentially, right now my experience has definitely been through the Western lens. I've noticed that most of my favorites have come from similar studios, which generally are composed by Japanese composers or draw from more Western sensibilities. But right now, I've noticed in the last 10 years, especially, that scope has changed both in terms of like the styles of writing, the actual instrumentation, of course, has changed. Going from playing Super Nintendo and N64 with all these little samples to live instruments, I started hearing symphonic music in games, especially. And of course, you have different exceptions. You have things like Cuphead, which is drawing from older forms of jazz and big band and swing. But of course, I've noticed the lack of Indian video game music, unless used for more what I would call tropey or very see, this is where there's perfect words for this, but basically this is the crutch. I can't call it inauthentic, but there's a lack of significant writing style while using those same instruments, which again, a few other questions I have will kind of go in there. So that's the state on that side. I have also noticed there's not a lot of rock and metal music, but it started to come out a little bit because people are using guitar players and writing from blues and, you know, these styles that do feature slightly different instrumentation. So that's something that's exciting to me, especially as someone who is looking for opportunities to perform on game soundtracks. And of course, like I see chat sounding off. Persona is a good example. Persona has tons of great songs for playing guitar and drawing from blues and, if I am so bold,
funk,
jazz fusion,
or the jazz,
which is exciting. So, Hassan, do we have you?
Am I back? Yes, no.
Just a little robot-y. Yes. Okay, let's see. Hassan, maybe might have to reset router there. In the meantime, let me see if I can roll to our next question. But here.
Yeah, I just wanted to chime in as well, and I guess
Please.
the East Asian counterpart would be like to me it just sounds like, oh, Chinatown music, where it just doesn't really mean anything. I don't know, like maybe what the Indian version would be, but no, I totally get where you're coming from. It's like the, I gotta go there. It's like, oh, this is like the white lens of how China should sound like, or Japan. And then when you look or go into like dig out through the layers a little bit deeper, and it's just like, I actually can't tell. It's so generic pan East Asian. I just can't pick out anything. So yeah,
it's the phenomenon that we never talked about. And of course, I told you this, but I read your panel on cultural appropriation in video game music, the Medium write-up, which was such a great write-up, because I don't know my music theory too well, and I feel like you spoke in a way that's very understandable, respectful to the effort, again, of composition, while really pushing for growth. And as you mentioned, there's this complexity with East Asian. There's significant tropes I find with Indian music represented in Western media, just like Indian people in Western media. We've gone from nobody to white actors portraying us in brownface, unfortunately, and going to every time someone takes psychedelic drugs on a movie, what do you hear? You hear someone playing electric sitar. And it fascinates me, because in so many ways, like, I get the connection, but also why? And there's these really cool but very, very, very few instances where I hear an Indian instrument used in context that isn't designated by these Western stereotypes. Like, have you seen I know Hassan has shared some of these memes, but like Desert Level Starter Pack. And it's just like sitar samples, and then maybe like an Egyptian instrument, like an oud, and then just some loop of tabla, and then they're like, okay, you're in now you feel like you're in Cairo, because you're listening to these Phrygian scale lines, which there isn't necessarily an associate. There are other music theory styles besides the Western institution that you could draw from. So I found that, obviously, like, for this like opener question, hopefully the chat kind of can see we have a lot to talk about. And
absolutely,
I see a lot of people talking about that. The line between homage and stereotype. That's well put. So
no, absolutely.
Oh, sorry.
Oh no, I'm just agreeing with you.
Oh, sure. So to that point, though, we've kicked things off with more of the reality, but has there been a moment when you were playing a game where you felt represented, even a little accurately? Hassan.
Yes.
All right, everyone in the chat, sound off. Hassan, proper welcome. How do you feel about video game musics and how diverse it is right now? This is what you joined for. Please,
So I think I heard snatches of this before when I was cutting out, but obviously a lot of the most popular video game music is Western music, and so it's both coming from a Western place and also like geared towards Western ears. So I found that, like, a lot of the times, even when composers will bring in influences from different cultures, it will sort of just be a Westernized version of that, which is not, like, in itself bad. It's just that there aren't very many authentic voices who are also contributing to the culture. And because that hasn't been happening for like the past 30 years of video game music being made. Oh gosh, it's more than that now. It was like 30 years, 20 years ago. But because of that, like, video game music has like developed a culture of its own, much like film music has, and there are like certain just conventions of this new genre, essentially, that has excluded, to a certain extent, voices from other cultures. And Yeah, so that's kind of how I feel about it right now. Although that is like changing, especially in the scene, I find,
Yes.
because more composers from around the world are more empowered to create with their own tools. But kind of along those lines, a lot of the tools that people use to make video game music and music in general, music production, it is heavily biased towards making Western European music, to the extent that I feel like if you took somebody who had never heard music before, taught them to use the tools that people use, they would make really weird music, but also music that like has Western sensibilities because it's baked into the tools, and it's not like very easy for people to create music from different cultures. Possible, but it is harder to do with the tools that we have.
It's a really interesting perspective, especially because you bring up technology and samples. And I know that we have quite a many subtopics there. The next question that I posed, and I'd like you to answer while fate is letting you talk with us. So obviously we have a lot of both issues and I think ways to go in terms of proper representation and efforted writing. But has there been a moment right now where you did feel while playing a game represented or kind of seen? It can be with the music or just with characters, but just to speak on both diversity of our backgrounds and who we are. Has there been like a game moment for you?
Shall I go? I have it in my notes here.
Go for it.
It gives me time to think. So I mean, like, the quick answer is like no, but the one game that really kind of spoke to me in terms of like, oh, I feel like this is kind of me in like, I really like, I get this character. It's basically the game Sleeping Dogs. I don't know if people have heard of it.
I love Sleeping Dogs.
It's actually a lot of fun.
Yeah, I know, and it's just like I've never played a GTA game, but Sleeping Dogs is like GTA in Hong Kong, but I think it's better. But I can't really remember the music. It was I don't know, I played it like many years ago, but I really like how they approach language there, especially as like coming from also a second generation kid from immigrant parents, and I'm not fluent in Chinese or Cantonese or Mandarin or anything, but I did grow up with like relatives who speak Cantonese, so hearing it, like actually hearing Cantonese within the game, I'm like, oh, I could understand snippets of it, like just like whiplash, whilst I was playing it, and also like the varying degrees of how they approach the language. So like I can't remember the main character's name. Wei Shen.
That sounds familiar.
Yeah, the main character, like I can imagine him, can't remember this name, but like, yeah, no, he doesn't speak any kind of Cantonese at all. I'm just like, I get that because that's me. I can't speak any Cantonese, but he's like going through this whole video game world and like being the main character, but without the whole like language barrier holding him back. And then there are other characters there where like there's another character who switches between Cantonese and English like mid sentence, and like something in English and then Cantonese term. I'm like, I do that. That's how I talk at home. That's how I talk to her. And I'm just like, oh my God, this is like, I've never, ever experienced with that. And then obviously when there's like the mother character who just speaks pure Cantonese, I'm like, that's my auntie.
Right.
Yeah, but even though I don't understand the language, but there is, I tend to focus on like the actions, like, oh, is she making food for the son and all that? I'm just like, oh yes, like there is like a familial love which I can see reflected in the characters, and like, yeah, never ever seen it in any other game, so that's like the only game that I will like physically remember.
I love that.
Yeah. That's
Awesome.
me.
Did you think of one now? Or
no, and
I mean that speaks to
that's basically like when Jade said no, I was like, yeah, I like was trying to think, but also kind of pretending to think, because in my heart I knew like no, not at all. But
yeah,
in terms of music, I think that is a part that I did leave off of my intro. So when I was growing up, my parents were playing a lot of R&B and soul, smooth jazz, especially for my dad. It's funny. I actually associate the Miseducation of Lauryn Hill, fantastic album. I associate that with Pokemon Yellow because I would always play that when my mom was playing it in the car.
Oh, yes.
But
that is a great album.
Yeah, I have not heard much of those things specifically in games. Yeah, and there was never a moment where I was like, oh, yes, my childhood, this is it. Yeah. And in terms of just like game characters, this is actually the game that I was going to talk about with musical influences, but I played the game Dandara earlier this year. Totally different culture for me. It's a Brazilian game, but the main character is a black woman, and I like texted my mom like, "Oh my god, mom, I'm playing as a black woman for like probably the first time in a video game." And she doesn't care about video games. She didn't care, but like it was still exciting for me at least.
Yeah.
That is awesome. That is exactly what, I feel like many of us are kind of striving for. For me, I've had these little snippets, and I think a few of my friends are in the chat and they might know these stories, but obviously I'm second generation, so I grew up with my parents. They liked video games and that it kept me occupied. We would play together for a while, but obviously there wasn't like that obvious. There's no Indian video game on the N64 or Super Nintendo, let alone developers. So any inch of like, some sort of reference to anything close was truly special for me, even if the reality is it wasn't proper. So I would say when you play like Ocarina of Time for the first time, the Zelda game, and you enter the Spirit Temple and you hear so much general but somewhat tangibly close to what I knew about my culture as a kid. The and it's playing this very like drone sort of instrument that's I can't tell you what it is because it's N64. But the moment I heard that, it felt like the music that I heard when I went to the temple, the music I heard when my parents are playing Indian music around the house, even though, it's kind of like, and I'm trying not to open this Pandora's box, when someone says, this sounds like that, they're making their first connections of music, even if it sounds silly. Like if someone hears Metallica one day and they say, this sounds like the Doom soundtrack, they're making a little connection. It's not, it's not perfect if we look with our musicians live, but they're slowly falling in love with the music. And I think that's what I was doing. And then I heard things like Hot Top Volcano, which is the other song I'm kind of keeping in my basket from Diddy Kong Racing, which uses a lot of loop samples of what one might associate with like Bhangra Indian music, more like dance friendly. And, if you're sitting in 2021, it might seem silly, if not like almost like a parody. But again, to me, I was just like, I see the little connections there as a kid, and I had nothing. There's nobody on TV who looks like me, who talks like me, who deals with immigrant parent issues like me, all the way through to like maybe the last 10 years. But I like that Hassan mentioned playing as a person of color, let alone a black woman, was that exciting moment. And for me, when Raji, an Ancient Tale came out last year, small little Indian game made by an Indian company, and I was watching the Nintendo Direct, and I all of a sudden I see a woman in a sari, and I'm like, wait, what? Like, wait, hold up. And then I heard the music, which is composed by a Greek person, interestingly enough, but I wouldn't know that detail, and I wouldn't have believed that detail for a while. That's when I felt seen. It's about an older sister. I have an older sister saving her little brother, which is also the reverse Banjo-Kazooie. But to that point, it, like you said, Jade, that is when I sat up and I was like, I'm in a game. And I see a lot of people in the chat talking right now. Everyone is maybe looking for those kind of moments because that's where we feel powerful. So we can kind of move into one of our other questions, which we already have dipped in. Do you feel that game music is representing styles close to you or influences well? And if not, or basically not, so what kind of steps do we need to do as composers, as the game cover scene and remix scenes? I myself have been doing like Bollywood themed cover mashups, and it's very weird as a second generation. So what do you think should be happening if that's not the case? Either or.
Part of my answer to this question, I think, goes back to what I was talking about earlier about how video game music is a genre now, and it has certain conventions. And so for me, sometimes even if I want to write music that's inspired by certain cultures, it just might not fit with the project or with the person's idea of what the project should be. And so sometimes you just like can't because of that limitation. But there's also, for me at least, like some degree of self-limitation, I think, because a lot of the opportunities where I would be able to use these sort of influences, it is the foreign place, and I don't necessarily want to just put all of
Could you elaborate a little bit on
music
that
in
for
the
the
foreign
chat?
place.
Just because I know we've been diving deep into this, so we know what you mean by the foreign place, but for the chat.
Yeah, there's this weird country called Ethnica. It's just a lot of the times I will hear in video games and in films, whenever you want to invoke the sense that there is a place or a thing that is like otherworldly or just like vaguely not European, that's when the influences from other cultures will start to seep in, which can be cool. It's just that because it doesn't happen in any other places, it's just like, all right, I guess it's just a vaguely ethnic amalgamation, and there's no other place for that in video game music. But I want there to be more places for that in video game music. So I get kind of stuck with that. I don't know what your experience has been, Jade.
Pretty much, yes, all of that. It's so earlier there was a mention with my article ages ago. So basically, I was part of a panel session talking about cultural appropriation within video game music, and through that we actually came through to like, okay, there are like several different elements that is very constricting. So obviously one is yourself as a composer. It's just like there's only so many music genres you can actually specialize in, and like you can never ever be perfect and learn about every single instrument music genre in the world, because that's never going to happen. Second, it's also the developer's vision, and it's difficult when it comes to like fantasy or sci-fi. Just like how does this culture going to be evolved in like 50 years time, 10 years time, 200 years time? What's that going to be like? And then also when you get a publisher who's investing, just like, well, it needs to fit the certain publisher's catalog, for example. Then the other part is like, okay, it's like it's the audience expectations as well. It's just like, okay, I want to sit down and watch a silly film about space samurais or something. So you're already coming in with a certain expectations, or even with horror, just like, okay, I'm gonna come in and I'm gonna it's the music is already gonna tell you what kind of horror it's gonna be, right? So there's all that limitations, and I think, to be fair, I don't think we have enough data, because there's like, again, we're only like referencing like I guess the Western game space. You know, I have no idea what is happening in like the Southeast Asian game space or you know like the African game space. Like I'm pretty certain there is like a dev community there somewhere. So you know like is there like an indigenous culture game space? You know, that will be really super interesting. Just like, oh, I wonder what kind of stories are going to be told, or you know, music that's coming out of that, for example. So again, loads of disclaimers. But I guess like what could game composers and artists do to further understand diverse music styles? I think one, first of all, look at music that's not written in Western notation. You know, already you're just like, oh my gosh, how are you going to approach that? You know, it's just like a very specific tool and skill set is already like out the window. Just like, okay, not using any kind of Western notation is another thing. And yes, and Hassan, you touched on this briefly, just like, you know, our tools already geared towards like Western scales and whatever. So just like, okay, how are we going to approach music that is not within the Western music category? But then on the other hand, just like, you know, we are creating a product for a Western audience because we're part of that same umbrella hemisphere. So, you know, that there needs to be a really good balance of like, hey, this sounds something new, but also does the audience understand it? Otherwise they'll be like, it just sounds like noise to me. And it's just like, you know, there's like, oh yeah, this is really authentic, but I don't understand it. And then, you know, it's just, yeah, it's just complicated, I guess.
It sounds like a almost business brain, because you're constantly thinking of the audience and you don't want to alienate, but you want to push the industry and or the world.
Yes.
My experience with
sorry,
I think we lost Hassan a little bit.
Oh no.
And he's back. Right. He might be
Is
jumping.
Is it any better if I turn my video off?
Yes, we were suggested if you can turn video off, and we will have you in spirit. I don't have a picture of you, but you're right over here.
Yeah.
So my experience with this kind of situation, of course, is I do think that these tropes are, I don't want to say harmful, but they're very limiting in terms of how we mentally view, you know, as Hassan put it, like this ethnic foreign land. Because again, there's no real reason that a video game can't by default, you know, start with using sitars, start by using flutes from, you know, different cultures and not defaulting to just symphonic or just chiptune. There's room for all of this with the given work. And while this kind of goes into the talk of cultural appropriation and how mentally I view discovering this kind of music, I started with my Indian influenced music ideas with video games very roughly. For example, if you're familiar with the song Lethal Lava Land, which is a small song from a small stage in the game Super Mario 64, it's a lava level or a desert level. They both share this very like open sort of song. And I tried interpreting that with my very rough understanding of traditional Indian music, of which I did a little bit of research on YouTube. There was actually a fantastic video series on Indian music theory that's actually been linked in a more popular Adam Neely video. But, you know, I was just trying to understand the sensibilities and the difference between how a Western guitar player, for example, might phrase or even arrange music compared to how Westerns will. You know, we have our things like verses, choruses, key changes, and Indian music doesn't focus so much on harmony. It focuses more on melody and improvisation and, you know, focusing on just giving off a texture. And I found that old Mario 64 song did, you know, sort of share that sort of approach, but again, it's very sparse. So, you know, from there I started looking into, okay, I've listened to an actual soundtrack now. I've watched composers from India speak. Let me do my homework. And you know, this is one of those things that I find very subjective. How do you feel okay doing these things? And I'm a big Beatles fan, and the fact that they lived in India, studied under a guru, and wrote songs that are extremely
Wow.
un-Western in nature, like Love You Too. I think that's a great example of a song by the Beatles, because all of their songs have been verse, chorus, bridge. Very simple, very sweet. And then on my favorite album, Revolver, there's a song that starts with the sympathetic strings being played all the way down to set the mood of a raga. This is very un-Western thinking. And I'm not a good theory breakdowner, but the fact that they didn't write the song in a very conventional way already tells me they're not doing this because it's pure trend or something, and they're not completely taking the sitar and then making mockery. They studied this thing and used it in a way that Indian people would use and performed with Indian performers. And I thought that was a really relieving kind of Beatles story. So to that extent, as I've I had started picking up like sitar and tabla and trying to incorporate these tropes in reverse,
Nice.
and counteract. They don't, and I've noticed. I'm sure you're familiar. The electric sitar. If you go on YouTube right now and type in electric sitar,
Yeah.
tell me how many scrolls it took to find an Indian person performing on one. And that's not to disparage the quality of the music, because a lot of those demos that I saw, they sound good, and they sound good in a Western context, but obviously there's a significant disconnect. So to you don't have to go to India and study under Ravi Shankar like the Beatles did, but I think it's interesting to present that challenge to my fellow cover artists, to my fellow Indian or second generation Indians, to composers. What can you do in the same regard to respect the culture you're deriving from, while still keeping your own voice, your writer's voice, and explore something wholly new, like if it becomes a hybrid situation, which is what I truly believe the Raji composers have done. The music in this game, if any of you check it out, it's not on Spotify sadly yet. I think it's a very curious case.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, cool. I just one very important thing that can be difficult given budgets, but like it's still very important, and I encourage all the composers out there to do this. Pay people who know how to play those instruments. Like even if you don't know how to play those instruments, like I don't know how to play all of the Western instruments that I use, but like as composers, you can definitely give the space for a performer to play what's idiomatic to their instrument, play what's idiomatic to the culture where that stuff comes from, and then you can take their performances and wrap your own stuff around it. But you will definitely always get a more authentic performance that way, and you will be contributing to actually getting these people work if you do that, as opposed to just learning through YouTube or something like that how to fake it yourself. So I would encourage everybody who has that opportunity to please pay the people who know how to play those instruments.
Yeah,
I love that. Could you actually, this is my segue to a next point. Do you have examples of soundtracks where you felt someone made that decision, or maybe someone didn't, and it was very obvious or hindered your experience? Either of you.
So you're asking for examples of soundtracks where I think that people who knew how to play certain instruments were involved in the process?
Right. Or, just ultimately your listening felt authentic as a result of, I'm sure that, if not other, aspects or steps taken.
Yeah. I think one really good recent one is the video game Signs of the Sojourner. I actually don't know who all was involved with that project, but I could hear the influences from Africa and in parts of the Mediterranean, jazz music, manouche, folk music, all of those things were blended into the soundtrack. And even if the people from those cultures may not have been directly involved, it was still like very well put together, and I could imagine that lots of different people were involved with that.
That's really cool. Very inspired. Jay, do you have any example? I'm sure you prepped.
Yeah, so I think the first instance here is I think definitely the Genshin Impact OST
Yes.
is a very, very good example of like where the balance was right for me. I guess like especially as a Chinese person, where I'm just like, oh, it's a game set in Asia. I wonder how bland, like how Asian bland, you know. You know, it's like it's just like a morbid curiosity for me now. Just like, oh.
How are they gonna mess this up?
I know, like you know what? It's nearly 5 a.m. here. I'm just gonna go there. But yeah, no, it's for a game that visually looks like Japanese anime, but I know the company is a Chinese. It's a Chinese dev company, but oh, the soundtrack is just like, you know, the balance is really nice there, and it got me thinking on the deeper level where like the musical language had lots of nuance and detail through it, like as a Chinese person listening to the Chinese instances. Basically, it's not just like a Western music bedding with the sprinkles of ethnic on top, if you know what I mean. That it's actually like woven and integrated to the DNA of the music, and it definitely sounds so different to the Asian soundtracks that I've been listening beforehand. So and it's really nice because yes, it is East Asian, but it is primarily Chinese, and that's a really nice blend. It's mostly Chinese instrumentations, Chinese composition techniques, but it's mostly Western centric, but it's still there, and it's just like, oh, this is really nice and lovely and unique. So yeah, shout out to to Genshin Impact, I guess.
That's beautiful, and I've taken a listen, and you know, my experience is obviously going to be very different than yours. I've had the opportunity to be in China a few times. I lived in Shanghai for a summer, actually.
Oh wow,
that's cool.
While my dad was working there, and it's such a culture shock. We've been so lucky to travel in my life, and obviously the music of the world has kind of you know, it's bled into me a little bit, but obviously not being a career musician, I didn't take advantage of all of that. But small things kind of communicate that better. And whenever I hear friends tell me like, bro, I'd love to get into Indian music more, are there any like film scores you recommend or things like that? Like that is that's all it takes, I think. You know, ask someone who you feel is authentic, and I don't always feel authentic, so I ask my mom for her recommendations. And my grandma, who doesn't speak as much English, but she actually has like a music degree, and she's spoken, and she used to play the vina, which is not like, it's not too dissimilar to a sitar. I think of it like the viola to the violin, but as you speak about the whole Asia being lumped together, and we've touched that you know, Indian and Egypt is kind of just mashed together as desert level, and you know, Hassan, you've touched on this before in a different talk that also heavily inspired this one. You know, the representation of African cultures is also extremely generalized. It's you know, the opportunity of a lifetime for us to be able to dive deeper, not simplify what, you know, diversity is many. So why are we trying to monolithize all these gorgeous cultures? So I did speak to soundtracks that have eclectic and diverse influences. One I wanted to throw in, I've been playing the game series Danganronpa I played the first one ages ago, and then I found out there was a second. And this is such a weird example, but there's a villain. He is a bear named Monokuma. He is evil and pits students to fight to the death for each other in this murder mystery. Whenever there was this very evil lurking sort of scene, the song would play, and just for simplicity, I won't pull it out. It's called Despair Syndrome 2. And it's this ominous synthesizer sound that's, just doing, I guess, like some sort of square lead. And there is a tabla going on. There's no desert. There's no Indian person there. So why did they choose the tabla? And it's performing a pattern, but it's not unrealistic. It sounds just like anything someone would play. So for me personally, I'm like, maybe that's the place we need to get to, where someone is using this instrument the way the people who designed it are using it, but keeping a writer's voice and using it for pure like function. And obviously, like this percussion thing, it's kind of like matching your heart race, because which student did he kill, and was that your favorite, kind of thing. I feel like that's one of my favorite examples where the game isn't about the cultural specific region, but we're able to see this beautiful like hybrid use that's not it's not parody, it's not disservice. On that note, again, I know we're kind of still sticking with cultural appropriation, and I think we should just take 5 minutes before we'll take questions purely from the chat. So chat, once again, thank you for all of your discussion. This is a very discussion heavy topic to me. I feel like, if there was one right way to do this, we could have just pinned it up. There wouldn't be a panel, but being able to talk with Hassan and Jade is I think one of the best ways we can tackle this. Has there been a very specific personal experience that you're able to share? I know NDAs and all, where you felt you were entering a different culture, or even, one that you feel close to, where you walked that line in order to feel like you're not appropriating and you're, feeling authentic as where as you can.
I don't think you gave me this question. I haven't written any answers for this. I was like,
what?
I don't.
It's because I didn't write it down. I'm pulling it from a few of the other questions that I've typed up. Just good or bad, and I can briefly start.
Yes,
just this
please.
one. So in 2020, I was asked by a group called Mariachi Entertainment System, if any of you are familiar, to perform with them. They are a mariachi band that plays video game music. They're obviously quite a large ensemble. They're run by David Ortiz. And being asked that question, I was, from the first time I went to MagFest, I dreamed of playing on the stage. I was so lucky to be given the opportunity once to play, rhythm guitars for a metal band. And we had like a pretty fun, it was actually quite funky, a set. But then Mariachi asked me, an Indian American person, if I would like to play both electric guitar on their heavily influenced by mariachi and Mexican regional banda, play nylon guitar, as in classical guitar, as in, wow, the pressure was huge. Not just, performing the music wasn't too hard. But the fact that they were asking someone to play with such a culturally tied music style was very scary. So obviously I said yes. And I did, and it was amazing. But I was extremely conscious of what I was doing because I was so scared. And I've had a very close relationship to Hispanic culture growing up in North Carolina. I made a lot of friends, and obviously I studied Spanish 5 years. And my professor, Senora, was amazing. I love her. She pushed me to love music, actually, and she was very supportive, like more than a teacher should. And she herself showed me so much about Cuban culture. I ended up looking up a few flamenco guitar players and kind of studying, and I would talk to Dave, and I was just like, you know, let me know how I can prep better, because I know I can play this stuff, but can I really play this stuff and feel comfortable? And you know, obviously I did my research, not just watching Coco, but I did. But so I felt, and they felt, hopefully, this was a great example of learning another culture without trivializing the nuance. And what I take away is a beautiful culture that I love, and a beautiful music style that I feel more comfortable employing, while, you know, obviously there's so much to learn. So there's my kickoff there. And chat, if you have any awesome experiences learning about another culture in the context of music or VGM, you know, I'd love to hear them, read them.
Actually, yeah, let me just have a quick scroll through.
So I don't have a recent professional version of this. I do have a cute childhood story, though. So I went to a school that taught like a bunch of different languages. It was like a language academy, it billed itself as. And one of the languages was Japanese. And so there were a lot of people at the school who had been taking Japanese since they were like in kindergarten. The teachers were actually from Japan. And there was this one day where they had like this cultural festival, and the teacher was teaching how to do taiko drumming. And because it was a public middle school, they did not have money to buy taiko drums, but they had like trash cans that had been fitted over with like tape, and it was just so cool to be learning, because the teacher happened to also like be a musician, and so that was probably actually one of the first like actual music playing that I did, because that would have had to be like 3rd or 4th grade. That's cool. I didn't realize that until just now.
Wow.
That's so sweet. Also FYI, like, you know, putting like taped up tires and all that is totally how we practice as well, because taiko drums are very expensive. So hearing that from someone outside the taiko community, just like, oh, that still happens. That's great.
Wow.
Yeah. I don't think I have any like VGM related stories to share, but I know that I'm very privileged in a way that, like, even since my secondary school was it's like, first of all, I was a music scholar, so I got my place like through an audition, music audition, and it was multi-faith school, so it was very much like focused on like, yes, we have people from all over the world kind of thing, and my school had stuff like African drumming and the samba band. And then in university, obviously, I joined my gamelan group, and then somehow or other, I saw the Japanese taiko group Yamato, the Drummers of Japan, perform live on stage, and then I got hooked. I'm just like, oh my gosh, like that feeling when you like just leave a gig and that energy is still there, and I'm just like, I have to learn how to play. So that's kind of like what started off my taiko journey, and I've been on a tour to Indonesia through my gamelan classes, because, you know, we've been attending like gamelan classes for like so many years now, and people just like, oh yeah, when you go to Indonesia, you know, like this and this and all these like stories of teachers and whatever, and then we did it. We actually went there with my class, and I'm just like, wow, this is like you know, sponsored by the Indonesian government, and we went to EC, which is like a literal university to study gamelan.
Wow.
and all that. So it was just like, oh, this is like absolutely fantastic. And yeah, no, I think I was just really lucky that I was already interested in, like, I guess, non-Western type of music. Like through Final Fantasy, I'm just like, what is that instrument? That doesn't sound Western at all. I must find out what it is. So then through that, you know, it just kind of opened. Even though I heard like a really bad synthesizer of a star or whatever, you know, through Final Fantasy or other games, then I'm just like, what is that? You know, I must learn more so that it's kind of part of my composer palette, if that makes sense. So yeah, it was really good that I was already interested, and then obviously I I don't know about where, like, location-wise, but here in London we have like SOAS, which is the School of Oriental and African Studies. Slightly problematic name, but
I
anyway.
was gonna say,
yeah, I'm
I
just
mean,
like,
you
"Ooh,
didn't name
okay.
it.
yeah. But on the other hand, they do a lot of like, winter and summer courses where it's just like, oh, let's do like a 2-week workshop of Balinese gamelan. I'm like, okay, cool. That's a gamelan style which I don't know because I actually study Javanese gamelan. So even within the gamelan umbrella, there's more different types of gamelan,
Right.
or like Chinese drumming, or like Afro-Cuban composition or whatever. Just like, wow, okay, so yeah, so that's like really, really good experiences for me in terms of like, there is stuff out there. You might need to dig it out a little bit more, but you can't do that unless you already want to explore something else,
Right.
Yeah, sorry, I went on for that, but that's my
No,
piece.
that's really cool to know, honestly. And again, that's the point of this. I don't hear these kind of stories, and I see all the connections. Now we
Yeah.
have just about 10 minutes left, chat. So I would love to see any questions you have for the three of us, or even in general, things that you could pose to all of us here together, VGM together.
Yes.
But I'd love to pull one and then see if we can get like some quick answers on as many as we can. So I think we have a reasonable amount of people in chat, so it shouldn't be too crazy.
I just read someone said Yamato, they're ridiculous. Just like, yes, in a good way.
Okay. Favorite cheese was Gouda, by the way. Favorite games
Gouda,
right
so
now that
good.
are representing a culture's music well. Okay, I didn't get to talk about music, and I know this doesn't answer the question, but when you mentioned the connection you felt in Sleeping Dogs, it reminded me of Hitman 2. This seems weird. This seems weird, but I've been playing this game with some friends in Discord to keep me company in the last few weeks while I worked, and there's a level in Mumbai. I click this expecting nothing. I was freaking out how accurate everyone was. The environment, the roads, the people's designs, the clothes, and the way they talked was extremely I'm trying to think of it was Desi, as we would say. It was a bunch of Indian people speaking English have like a few gradients from if they're in India and they're talking and they have the British, and then there's people who dial back. Like my mom, she'll switch it like this. She talks to me, she talks like this. You can't tell. And then there's this little line. So honestly, I want to beat 100% that game, because like you fight like a corrupt Bollywood director, and the guys, the names are all accurate. Not everyone is something Patel either. It's that one step forward. So that's mine. How about you?
I think, Sleeping Dogs is still the one and only contender in my brain, but it's not really music culture though, so I really am drawing a blank. I guess Genshin Impact music wise is really good, but it's still like a blend of Western orchestral and Chinese in the, I think it's called the Liyue region. I can't remember. It's been a while since I played Genshin Impact, but yeah. No, sorry, I'm drawing a blank.
That's all right. I want to lightning round these a little bit.
Yeah, sure.
Hassan, any games right now that you feel are doing a good job culturally, or?
Right now, I feel like, not that I'm currently playing now.
That's so sad.
That's all right too. Again, that is an
it's
answer,
valid, but
right?
also sad. Yeah.
All right, let me pitch a new question to you all. From Sanjesh, for those of you who grew up listening to music that was closer to your ethnic background, which we kind of shared, does it influence how you write and compose, let alone how you listen to music?
For me, I definitely think so, but that is an interesting story because I mentioned the sorts of music that my parents would play when I was young, but actually didn't really. I don't know how to phrase this. This is not going to be right. But I didn't like music for a long time, but it wasn't really. It wasn't really that I didn't like it. I just wasn't really paying attention to it, really. So like getting involved in band and orchestra, and also like listening more to video game music because I was directly engaged with it. Those were like the first things that I consciously sought out. But then as time went on, I found myself both gravitating towards the sorts of music that I heard from my parents growing up, but also that was coming out in my music writing. Even if I didn't like specifically intend for it, it was still definitely there.
I love that. Jade, similar question?
Kinda. I think it's more like because I've been studying gamelan and Japanese taiko drumming, I'm naturally more like textures and rhythm based now. Like, as opposed to like if I was just purely still playing classical piano, I would be like, oh, harmonic structure and blah blah blah. But no, and then on top of that, it's like the music tech side where, you know, like music concrete, that went like the modern art of music, and then also using technology wrong. And yeah, so I don't know, I think I'm just like a pot of influences there, which I don't know. I just pull it out sometimes, depending on what I feel like. But also, sorry, I just remembered, like reading up my notes, like is there a particular game OST you enjoy that uses a diverse influence, but is also accurate? This is really bad, but also Taiko no Tatsujin is accurate because
Yeah, I hear that.
Yeah, because Don-chan, in Don-chan, so when like there's no like notation in taiko drumming, we learn verbally. So like so like don is like a beat, and doko is like a 2 beats or something. So if you go like don doko don doko don doko don, that's just like, okay, that you already get like the rhythm. So in Taiko no Tatsujin, there is like a few songs here and there which goes like don don doko don don don, and just like, hey, this is accurate. So yes, just to like plug that in there.
That's good. For me, and we've got 5 minutes left, so I'm going to start answering these a little quick. By the way, if I see any great questions, I'm putting them in our document, so I might start a little Twitter thread to answer these after. So again, for me, I grew up listening to basically all the British music went to my Indian parents, and God bless them for listening to rock, disco, and Bollywood and musicals. So I'm influenced more by Bee Gees than people might realize. I'm influenced by, you know, a lot of these things. So in terms of writing, I feel like this influenced me to have a very blues oriented cultural like approach. I play by ear. I have relative pitch according to some people and perfect pitch according to some people. I think my sense of melody comes from Bollywood vocalizations that I used to like kind of practice on piano. So that's how that's influenced. Next question I want to dive into, Insane in the Rain. What could the process of moving away from tropey usages look like? Imagine like Indian classical music being used to score an entire soundtrack. I think all we have to do is look at, you know, the film industries of those respective companies have done pretty good jobs with scoring, telling stories, scenes that someone dies, scenes where people fall in love. I watched mostly Bollywood from 2000, so it's all love music. Think about that and the sensibilities of structure that don't rely on our Western verse chorus, that don't rely on the same kind of lens. Again, there is things like tension and release, but they use these different, and that's where I feel we can and will get to that place. That's me.
I want to go back to the thing that I said a long time ago, but it's just always relevant. We need to be paying people to tell their authentic stories, not just so that I'm not saying that we only need to pay Indian composers and they're the only people who can ever pick up a tabla in their life.
Of course.
But like giving them the opportunity to tell their stories will put that, contributed to the culture, and that does a long way towards like making it feel more normal. So like for me, because I was playing a lot of Japanese RPGs growing up, like I honestly, for a long time, did not understand that certain functions of that weren't Western. And it was just like a normal thing to me. And so I grew up thinking that certain aspects of Japanese culture were kind of just Western. Yeah, so just being able to do that more, I think, will go a long way towards helping that.
Yeah. Bouncing off of that, I think maybe another way to look at it is like, what is the power dynamics and the power structures? Like again, are you giving space for an artist that you brought on board to actually express themselves, which is, you know, most authentic to their voice, and then are you embellishing it, or are you just like, oh, just like improv a little bit and then we'll just like fudge it into like the rest of the score kind of thing. Yeah, so relevancy is there, but also like I guess it depends on the project. Like Black Panther is a really good example where the composer actually, you know, put time and effort into learning and actually fully integrating it. Like it could have just all been, it could have gone horribly wrong. Just like, you know, just put some R&B in here and then it's just like,
You know, Jade, you bring up Marvel, which is something close to my heart, but obviously I will not get the same experience watching Black Panther as other people.
Yeah,
and by the time, so right now, like when the Miss Marvel show comes out, while she is a Muslim American, when I read that, that was like the first Marvel comic. I was like, again, you felt seen. And this goes into a question that Nate asks: would you prefer games just be set in the the locale that these musics and cultures are from, or is there a way to separate the appreciation stereotype kind of line? And I think, me personally, I'm shooting for the place where any kind of instrument can be used in any kind of context. You know, a space level should be able to have you know, huge drums playing and, you know, percussive instruments from Africa, and there's no reason why a big cityscape could have, you know, influences drawn from India. It's truly just about effort in my mind and the reflection of that effort. And I love that Hassan's pushing on hiring the people behind it, because that's a big thing. We're actually just about close to the end, so thank you everyone in chat. I've loved reading your questions. If we have one or two that we didn't answer, I'll do a Twitter thread. Where can we find more of these thoughts and learn more of these things from you, Jade and Hassan?
Twitter. It's probably
Twitter,
best.
yeah.
Sure, your tags just real quick.
At JD Wasabi.
And I'm at Mr. Hassan-san.
And I am PANUGANTI. And this has been a wonderful talk on the diversity in video game music. Now put the whole world in all of your games, and have an awesome VGM together.
Thank you. Bye.